Today I'm going to introduce you to my cousins Dixie and Roy D. Dixie and Roy D are going to help us remember their acronyms to help us remember our X and Y values. So Dixie tells us all about the Y values. She tells us that the Y values, X values. She tells us that the X values are the input, which we've been talking about. Today we're learning that it's the domain independent variable because it's the one that goes in first, the input. Everything depends on it. And so then we're going to look at Roy D. He tells us about Y, about the Y values. And so where X is the input, Y is the output. Where X goes in first, the input, and is independent, Y is dependent. It depends on which X we're using. And then today we're learning that it's the range. So when I ask you for the domain, I'm talking about all the possible X values of a relation or function. All the possible X values that are in that relation or function. In the same vein, when I'm talking about range, I'm talking about all the possible Y values in that relation or function. So today we're only talking about discrete domain and range. And the way I help you remember that is it has the word dis. Discrete is disconnected points. Dis. You can remember that. Discrete is disconnected. So this is something where you can make a list. You can list the X's and Y's because they're finite. There's a concrete finite list. And with domain and range, we always list them least to greatest. Always least to greatest. So the domain here is definitely discrete. I have a list. So I'm going to list all my X's least to greatest, -5, -3. Now, if I listed -3 again, I'm being redundant. There's no sense in me saying I have -3 and I have -3. So I'm going to list it once, and then I'm going to go to the range, the Y values. I'm going to list them least to greatest and only list them once. Now, just a side note, this is not a function because these X's repeat and these X's repeat. Therefore, not a function. Just extra info here. And then just a reminder from yesterday's lesson, if I ask you what is f of 0, I'm asking when X is 0, what is Y? You're going to say 6. All right, let's look at it from an ordered pairs. Once again, we're going to list for domain. We list the X's least to greatest, which they're already in order for us. And then we list the Y's least to greatest, and they are not in order for us. We're going to have to work on that. That's all we're doing today. With a discrete list, you can list them least to greatest. So let's look at a mapping. On a mapping, they should already be listed least to greatest for you. And they should already only list them once. So there's my domain. There's my range. I think that's a 4. And here's the deal. Here's the first one. The input is your X. It's drawing an arrow to the output because you have the input first. That determines the output. The output depends on it. Output is Y, but we learned yesterday function notation. So this f of X here also just means Y, the output. Now let's look at a graph. So from this graph, can you list the domain? Well, you could just follow these points to the x-axis and see that we have -4, -1, 2, and 3. And then so therefore, if we're looking at a graph for domain, least to greatest goes left to right. And then if you're looking at range on a graph, least to greatest goes bottom to top. Remember that we're always least to greatest. So look at the y values. I go from -2 to 1 to 4 to 5. If this confuses you, I know some people get really confused reading the graph, just name your points. And then you have your x's and y's to list. And I think we'll stop there.